I'm practicing how to say feminine phenomenon in my head.
Feminim, feminine, femininomenon. Feminine,
Feminine
omenon.
phenomenon. See,
Feminine,
I want it to be
omenon.
phenomenon,
Yeah,
like, but it's
femininomenon.
feminine phenomenon.
Yeah,
Feminine phenomenon. Mm-hmm.
femininomenon. It's a femininomenon.
Mm-hmm. I hate it when like the things that you're supposed to do actually help.
Oh
It's so
God,
good.
when it's like, oh, if I exercise and drink water, I don't feel like I'm gonna die as much.
Yeah, or like clean till you find it.
Ugh.
That's the worst. That's my mom's rule, and I heard it for my whole childhood, and I was so excited to be an adult and not have to hear that.
So it's like when something is missing, just start cleaning,
Hmm.
and eventually it'll show up.
And I always hope it won't. Like I want
Always,
for
always.
this time to be the time that it does not work so that I have an excuse to not clean, you know, next time I
Hmm?
lose something. Her other rule is that shoes, if you lose your shoes, you should just look near the other shoe. Like that your shoes are always near each other, which is not technically true, but is true enough times that it makes sense. Like if you are missing a shoe, you should start looking near the other shoe instead of looking like in another room.
I mean, you very rarely take them both off at different times.
Right. Unlike socks, because I routinely have one sock on, which I guess is probably not a normal thing. Shall we make a podcast?
Yeah, let's make a podcast. Hello and welcome into another episode of Gifted Kid, Messy Adult, a neurodiversity podcast, the show where potential went to die. I'm one of your hosts, Ellie Michaels. I use she, her.
I am your other host, Jessica Michaels, and I use she, they.
How are we feeling today, Jess?
I think we have discovered through this process and like going through how I feel that I am actually less gender queer and more a gender
Hmm.
because I do not feel anything either way.
You're, you are an amorphous blob containing a consciousness.
Yes. Now, I don't know if that is my permanent state because I got a lot going on you know, as far as stuff. So we're not going to say that that's a permanent state, but I do think it is the state for now.
Cool.
But I will keep you
Well, the
updated.
important thing is that's your current truth.
Absolutely.
Well, today we are continuing our series on unique psychological challenges faced by gifted people. Specifically, today we're talking about binocular vision, and not like the medical kind of binocular vision, which is apparently a thing, and all that Google threw at me when I was trying to research this because Google sucks now. Um, Binocular vision is more the idea that when you're interacting with another person, you're watching their behavior as if from a distance, like you're watching through binoculars and you're trying to analyze their actions and intentions and you're drawing conclusions about what they're thinking and actually doing. And you kind of expect them to have that same level of scrutiny when it comes to what you're saying, rather than just being in the moment with them and believing that what they say is what actually they mean,
Hmm.
which kind of just plays into the general theme of over analyzing everything.
And we're continuing this conversation based upon a TikTok by Dr. Joey Autistic Psych, and we'll make sure we put a link in the show notes. She had gotten that research from somewhere, but we can't figure out where because, again, the apparently binocular syndrome is a medical condition, which I had no idea about. I can think of one. It's kind of your
Okay, you go.
example. So we were going to a Christmas in July event.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to a Christmas in July event. And so there was going to be a white elephant gift exchange. And because Christmas is my absolute favorite time of year, my favorite holiday. And so you mentioned, oh, you get to wrap some presents. And I said, I suck at wrapping presents. I am not good at it. And we left the conversation there. And then before we left, I went to go get the presents to wrap them, and you were wrapping all of them, and you were kind of stressed about it because you also had other things to do, and now you had to do this task. And I was like, why are you wrapping all the I can wrap the presents. And you had interpreted me saying I suck at wrapping presents to mean so I must wrap the presents. That responsibility is on me, when that is not what I said, but you were expecting that I thought the same way you thought, like from your head, and that you knew what I meant when that wasn't the case. Do you remember that? Is that like a decent
Yeah,
summarization of events?
yeah, that's exactly that. And I've seen more people talking about that kind of thing, particularly in long-term, intimate, and committed relationships like ours. And how when someone asks you a question, you don't necessarily hear that question. You might say, "Hey, did you vacuum?" And you're just asking if I vacuumed or not, because maybe you're wondering if the vacuum needs a new filter because you thought I was going to vacuum, but it looks like there's still stuff on the floor. But I hear it as, hey, you lazy bum, you should get up and vacuum. Why haven't you vacuumed? You're the worst. And so I have seen it as a relationship tool that when the person reacts to what you say, go, hang on, what did you think? What do you think I just said? And then I would repeat back, well, you said I should vacuum. And you go, no, that's not what I meant. I meant, did you vacuum? That's it. And it's that kind of filling in the gaps and jumping to conclusions, which I think is especially bad in gifted and neurodivergent people, because something that we all seem to really have in common is that we have spent so much of our lives being misunderstood. And like, not just like, oh, nobody gets me, I'm a tragic thing. Like, no, like legit, like you don't understand the words that are coming out of my mouth. The sentence that I just said doesn't translate into the head of the person that you're talking to. That's why we love context. That's why, in my mind, a sentence needs to have two statements. One is the setup, and then a comma, and then what I'm actually talking about. And I've had to train myself to put a period, not a comma, because those are each a sentence. Because every sentence should also have a parenthetical afterwards that is explaining my intent of that sentence and where I came up with this assumption and the logic behind it. And you can see this gets exhausting.
This is why my texts are so long,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much. It's difficult because, first of all, I think that a lot of us have also experienced so much judgment in our lives
Mm-hmm.
because we see patterns differently. We're processing so much information. I mean, whether you're gifted and autistic, or autistic and ADHD, or dyslexic, wherever you fall in this neurodiversity arena, you have likely faced a good deal of judgment. And so we often apply that judgment to our expectations of what other people mean because we're so
Mm-hmm.
used to experiencing it. Like, my when I heard this, the first thing that came to my mind is, like, if you say, I really need to get up at 6, I'm frustrated that I keep sleeping in late, so I really need to get up at 6. And then I hear you saying, and you should also get up at 6. And the reason I feel bad, is because you're sleeping in and I am judging you for being lazy,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't make, because that doesn't make sense at all. You're talking about you and your experience. So first of all, it's pretty selfish of me and pretty egotistical of me to go, oh, you said something about yourself. Clearly, you were talking about me, obviously, but to remind myself that no, if first of all, if you had a concern about me, you'd likely talk to me about me because otherwise it's really inefficient. It is a really terrible way to talk to somebody about themselves, by talking about yourself. So I think you would do it differently. But that not everything you say is a judgment on me.
No, just most things I say. That was a
Thanks.
joke. That was a
Yeah.
joke.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I was going to mention is social cues that, and
Hmm.
I think she mentioned this in the TikTok video, kind of as an aside. We, if you are somebody who doesn't understand social cues, which happens a lot with autistic people, can happen with ADHD people, it can happen with gifted people. I mean, it can happen again anywhere, in this neurodivergent side of the neurodiversity arena. Since we can't recognize the social cues, and I don't get anything from facial expressions, so I don't get that information either. It's like we have to fill in the gap that we experience in information. And so we just pop in what we think, which is often incorrect.
I think also notoriously, neurodivergent people tend to have an issue with directness. And not in the sense that we can't handle directness, we prefer directness, but it's the neurotypicals who are not direct and they do not actually say what they mean. But that's not all the time. Sometimes they actually do say what they mean, and it's really hard to parse when I need to take you at your word and when I need to extrapolate from what you're saying that I should change that. It's that whole "are you hungry" thing. It's like, well, yes, I am hungry. It is lunchtime. But that person meant, do you want to go to lunch with me? But that's not what you said.
Oh, yeah, this is bad. Like if people say, we're going out Friday,
Good for you.
right? And then, to me, that's not an invitation. They're
That's
saying
a
they are
statement.
going out Friday. Yeah.
I
If
hope you have
they
fun.
if they wanted me to go, they would ask me. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, I'm sure that has resulted in lots of hurt feelings, um, about not being included in things. And people are going, but we did invite you. We did ask you to go. It's like, no, no, you didn't.
Well, and that cuts both ways because from our perspective, somebody saying, I'm going out on Friday, and then not following that with, would you like to join, is them rubbing it in your face that you're not included. And then from their perspective, you not taking that invitation is saying, I don't want to be included. And so now immediately what was a friendly gesture has become a two-way insult. And it's all because the second sentence wasn't there. The context, the parenthetical after the sentence should be, would you like to join us? And when you get burned by that kind of thing enough times, you kind of start trying to compensate for it by extrapolating. And I know that I do this hugely. It's not just with you and me. The extrapolating and the kind of jumping to conclusions is like the core of being gifted. It's why they think we're smart. And it's just because we skipped, I'm not doing an A to B to C to D. I'm going A to D because my brain went, oh, there's a pattern. We can skip B and C. And so, like, we were watching the Olympics the other week and we were watching gymnastics. We were watching floor. And somebody landed just outside their corner and they were doing an amazing job. Um, but they landed just outside their corner. And the annotator made a joke about how it's okay if you land beyond the limits of the area as long as you're still inside the building. And then he continued to say, as long as you don't end up in the parking lot. And that's when you laughed. But I started laughing at inside because I could tell he was going to say inside the building. And the parking lot is just an extra extraneous bit to the joke that just makes it a little bit funnier. It's a tag. And so my brain had already jumped to the conclusion of what the punchline was going to be, which is, you know, useful, I'm sure, somewhere. But if I'm at a comedy club, I start laughing a couple seconds before everyone else, and I just look like a freaking weirdo. Like, I mean, pink hair, facial piercings. I already look like a weirdo, but now I look even weirder, and I'm drawing attention. Well, again, purple hair, drawing attention, but even more.
But here again, you are using your binocular vision thinking to assume that other people in the comedy club are paying attention to when you start laughing and judging you for it
Oh,
and
oh,
thinking
that's good.
that you look weird. I mean, we're both comedians. If so, I like it when anybody laughs anytime. If somebody's laughing earlier, that's great because then it's, that's nothing but a positive thing. I wouldn't think it was weird. And then in a comedy environment, I'm focused on what's happening on stage. I'm not, unless somebody is heckling or dropping a drink, I'm not paying attention to the people around me. I'm paying attention to the comedian, and laughing isn't out of place. So I would not think anybody laughing in the comedy club for any reason would be weird because that's what we're there to do. So you're doing it right now.
Whoa, mind blown. Yeah, I guess we overanalyze everything.
I just think, one of the things that you learn as you grow up, ideally, as a teenager, I remember being so embarrassed, or like maybe a preteen, so embarrassed if like I had to wear a coat or a hoodie or something. Like there was always something if I needed to do something that was contrary to what I wanted to do, to me, when I would then leave the house, everybody in the world was going to be focused on my socks or my jacket or whatever I thought, whatever was taking my drama at the moment. And one of the things you hopefully learn is that nobody's really paying attention to you most of the
Nobody
time.
cares.
No,
Nobody
and
cares.
even, when we're out together, I mean, first of all, we're a queer couple, and we, will hold hands and, be generally affectionate because we're married and that's what we do. But then also you do have a fairly loud, was it a loud presentation with your purple hair and piercings and whatnot? So we draw
Busy. She said it was a busy
busy.
presentation.
I'm the one who's called loud. I am the one I have because I'm loud verbally, and then my personality is loud, apparently. So I mixed us up. But yeah, so but even then, even in a situation where we could very clearly draw more attention than your average person and draw more judgment than your average person, very infrequently are people truly paying that much attention to us.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, you we are both more sensitive to, I'm particularly sensitive though around you looking for any indication that anybody is paying extra attention to you in any way, because I'm very very protective, so I'm always on guard. But most of us are just trying to live our lives, and I'm thinking about, but then think about when we're out, what are we thinking about? Well, we're thinking about, okay, we have 4 more errands to run. We've got to get
Mm-hmm.
groceries, which order should we do these things in? Oh, we got to get back and walk the dog. Like, we're thinking about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we not assume that everybody else is thinking about themselves? That saves so much worry and so much of this extra consternation. People are focused on themselves. People are focused on themselves. Thank you.
And for context, she's focused on anyone paying me weird amounts of attention, just in case there's about to be bigotry perpetrated, um, which there really doesn't tend to be, at least not to my face.
Yeah, I'm not just wildly jealous of you,
Yeah.
and not wanting anybody to pay attention to you. Um, yeah. I mean, we are, first of all, we're in one of the top two states for trans individuals. It's Illinois and Colorado. We're in Colorado. We're from Illinois. And also, this is a Denver's pretty laid back
Mm-hmm.
anyway. People aren't, people routinely are out in like tennis shoes and jeans, which would be something like in New York City, that would be something that would be judged. So just our area is not a particularly judgy group. There people kind of wear what they wear. People are outdoorsy. It's a little more, hippie kind of liberally. So it's even more so a reason to understand that not everybody is focused on you and you can stop worrying about it because it's very unlikely. But we still hold in that idea that we're being judged all the time and make that a very stressful, oh, people must think this. It's like, no,
Must
they're
they?
not.
Must they really? Yeah. So I think it really just boils down to another flavor of communication difficulties. And like most of the rest of them, it's one that can be addressed. I don't know if it can be fixed, but I think there's certainly methods like the hang on, what did you just hear me say? You know, that's kind of up there with the have you eaten? You appear to be reacting rather strongly to my question about if we have toothpaste or not. What did you just hear me say? It's like, well, I haven't been to the store and I was going to take care of that yesterday, and you were not aware of that. And my disappointment in myself is now being projected onto. Yes, we have toothpaste left.
That is exactly what my thought process immediately went to is I was going to go to the store yesterday and I couldn't. And yeah, so I'm right there. I'm right there with you. I think it's also good, if this were something I were working on with a client, to think about what are you focused on from minute to minute to minute. And most of the time, it's yourself. And it makes more sense to know that other people are focused on themselves, and that can release some of that responsibility that you feel to the world. I think also it is good to examine why you think this the story in your head is true. If you think, oh, this person said this, but they meant this, or here's what they meant by that. It's like, why do you think that that's true? Did they say that to you? Did or are you assuming? Do you know that for sure, or are you guessing? So know why the story in your head is true. And that actually is something that when I'm working with neurotypicals or working with leaders who are needing or wanting to be more considerate of neurodiversity, that's what I ask them to do is don't assume based upon the things that you are bringing, your history to a conversation. You don't know what somebody thinks and feels unless they tell you. Otherwise, you're just assuming. So just because somebody isn't smiling, don't assume they're not happy. Just because somebody didn't use small talk, don't assume that they're unfriendly because that's a lot of what neurodivergent people get. So I guess we
Mm-hmm.
have to also kind of take our own medicine and apply those things to other people as well.
Yeah, and then the other half of this is we're overanalyzing somebody, and we kind of assume that the person we're overanalyzing is doing the same to us. And so clearly I was upset. Why didn't she say something about it or help me do something about it? Well, did you say I'm upset? Did what? Why didn't she help me with the dishes? Can't she see there's this giant pile and I'm getting overwhelmed? Well, did you say, hey, could you help me with the dishes? There's a giant pile and I'm getting overwhelmed. And that part, I think, is almost more difficult because you have to advocate for yourself, which means that you need to believe and respect the idea that you're worth other people's time and effort, that your needs are valid and just as important as everyone else's.
Ooh.
And then, just the other night, I actually did ask for some help with the dishes, and then they started getting set like in the sink because I don't like dishes to be set in the sink. You want to be able to use the sink. And if there's dishes on the counter, it's just because either the dishwasher is running or it has to be emptied and the new shift needs to go in. And if you just keep your dishes, next to the sink, kind of stacked, then you don't get that gross smell. You don't get the stagnant water with, a little bit of food in it or whatever. And 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 as I was actually getting help, I said, "Oh, could we not just stack the dishes in the sink too? Could we actually clear off the thing?" And that was kind of insulting. And it was calling out this person for helping me, but not helping me in exactly the way I needed. And a much better way to phrase it was, "Oh, I'm also going to need access to the sink in about 2 minutes." Or, or I could have just waited 3 minutes to rinse out the pan I was going to use. That was me projecting, like, oh, they're not going to actually do the dishes the way I want, which reminded me of a rule I saw the other day, which was there's like unwritten rules of your household, which is if you're doing a task and someone criticizes how you're doing it, unless they're stopping you from like damaging something, once they criticize you, that task is now theirs. So you
Yes.
criticize somebody doing the dishes, like, oh, guess whose dishes they are now? You know.
Yes. That was something that I had to, like, when we got married, that was something that I had to, I remember the moment, like it was yesterday, because I had fallen into the habit of when we would do laundry, we would air dry it. And so I would hang it on the laundry rack. And as you do, I had created kind of a pattern in the way that I hung the clothes on the laundry rack from time to time to time.
You
And
had a method.
then, yeah. And then one day you were hanging up the clothes. And I started to correct you and started to say, oh, you need to. And then I stopped and I thought, well, first of all, how do I know that my way is the right way? How do I know
Ooh.
that? How do I know that my way is the only way? Nobody taught me how to do this. I just made this up. Doesn't it make sense that somebody else's way that they make up could work equally as well? And the second thing is, and I want Ellie to continue to help me hang up laundry. I don't want to be the one that hangs up laundry all the time. So if I want somebody else's help in doing this task, I can't be a jerk about it because they're not going to be inclined to do it in the future. And I don't want them to think, oh, I just do it wrong. And because that also is going to keep them from doing it in the future. So it was one of those moments that was kind of an instant shift in my life and shift in my thought process. Um, that kind of comes when all of a sudden you realize your life is now different than it was yesterday. So
Mm-hmm.
you gotta do things differently. So yeah, that was one of the clearest memories I have of really changing my mind and behavior pattern and really learning something new.
And you know what I still do to this day? Hang up the laundry if it needs to be hung up. And it's just it goes on the rack. I mean, granted, it's easier now because we have a dryer. Um, Originally, it was we had the laundry room. Now we're lucky enough to have in-unit washer and dryer, for which I will never stop being grateful. But there's delicates and there's stuff you don't want to put through the dryer, and so we hang that stuff up. And we had the conversation about different methods of doing it. It came up ones I can think of, but the end of the conversation wound up being it'll get dry. I mean, partially because we're in a desert and everything will dry. You spill some water on the floor, you just kind of leave it. Like that'll be gone in 20 minutes. We're fine.
Like that section of the floor is now clean.
Yeah, yeah. The floor actually needed some water. It was getting dry.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure that well, I'm not sure. It would not surprise me if that conversation happened because part of my brain sort of snapped, and that was the way that I brought to your attention that perhaps there was a different method of hanging clothes available should you feel like a different way would be beneficial, and putting that information to you, allowing you to make a determination yourself and not offering judgment in either way, um which is though a totally valid way of having those conversations instead of silently judging. Like there's so many ways to communicate these things in a way that ends up positive for both of you. And I think the thing about binocular thinking is the person it hurts most is you. You are assuming people's judgment. You are assuming other people's stories. You are putting all of this on yourself that doesn't always need to be there. In a lot of cases, it doesn't need to be there. So you're hurting you. So by doing this work to reframe the way that you think, you are really you can remove a large stressor from your life.
Mm-hmm. And as I do recall that conversation about hanging the laundry, you thought it was funny. Like that's how it came through, is that, oh, the way I'm doing this is silly. And so I really wasn't particularly insulted, because with a little bit of moment and look, I'm like, oh, I am doing this in a silly way. Oh, but it wasn't like this is silly and stupid and you need to change it. It was just like, that's kind of silly. Well, how do you do it? Well, I do it like this. Well, that makes sense. But then I didn't like take that on board or like need to change. So, the best kind of confrontation where there is nothing you have to do about it.
Because it doesn't matter. And so many of these things don't. But we assign this extra importance to them that does not need to be there. Now, of course, there are times when there is judgment and times when these things are that important. But using our pattern recognition skills to apply this danger pattern to all of these interactions is not necessary. It's not a helpful thing. So, gifted brain, calm down. It's okay. Maybe this isn't the pattern developing that we think it is.
Thank you for helping. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Well, that seems like as good a note to end on as any. Well, if you like our show and would like to support us, please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe and rate us on YouTube at Gifted Kid Messy Adult, and you can find our Facebook group, Gifted Kid Messy Adult. There's a theme. If you'd like to support us financially, you can find us on Patreon at the Neurodiverse Workplace, where subscribers get access to all kinds of bonus content, curated memes, behind-the-scenes shenanigans, voting on future topics, and you can help us keep the lights on here and at home, while also helping us provide free resources and support for our fellow neurospicy adults. If you'd like to suggest a future topic or just say nice things and give us that sweet, sweet external validation, you can email us your thoughts, questions, and praise to giftedkidmessyadult@gmail.com. And you can also support us by checking out our GoFundMe to help pay for our ridiculous medical expenses. There's a link in the show notes, or you can just search Jess and Ellie's Fight for Health. Jess, where can people find out more about you?
CoachJessicaMichaels.com. You can sign up for free coaching consultation as well as find other resources, including my course supporting neurodiversity in the workplace that is available on Udemy and Udemy Business.
Nice. And if you'd like to find out more about me, you can find me at Ellie Michaels Productions, where we can make some pretty cool video content specifically for you or your business. So until next time, take care of each other out there.
Bye.
Good pot.
Good.
All right, let's make some lunch.